Hello.
Continue.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
I have to hit continue.
Okay. Hello, ladies. It's Celeste. Unfortunately, Alice could not make the computer connections that she needed to make, so she will not be addressing the membership today. I would just like to, before I start the program, remind you about the raffles. There's one in March, there'll be another one in April, so please send in your money. That being said, I will tell you that it's certainly my pleasure today to welcome Mr. Jim Brochu and Mr. Steve Shacklin here to the Manor Club. It's a program I have been looking forward to, and I think it's going to be wonderful and very, very special. There will be a Q&A afterwards, so please compile your questions and have them ready for Mr. Brochu and Mr. Shacklin. Just sit back and relax. I'm going to turn the program over to Steve Shacklin, who will speak to us a little bit and give us a little bit of a bio introducing Jim, and I know you're going to love it. Enjoy, ladies. Steve.
Hello there. I am Jim's partner both in art and in life. And after 35 years of living with Jim Brochu, one of the best things I can say about him is that no matter how many times he tells these wonderful stories, I never get tired of hearing them. He has serenaded audiences for decades with incredible backstage escapades on Broadway stages, cabaret stages, regional theaters, cruise ships, salons, and living rooms. Any place he goes, people want to hear the stories. Whether he's talking about growing up in Brooklyn or carousing backstage and in dressing rooms with, well, for instance, one time sharing Kentucky Fried Chicken with Colonel Sanders and Noel Coward. Witnessing the volcanic Zero Mostel turn from monster to innocent angel in a split second, or playing backgammon across the table with Lucille Ball. Both of them laughing and competing like two mad dogs over a 50-cent bet. It's all true, and it's all so much fun. And whether we have, whenever we have a party here at our Manhattan apartment or when we're visiting other people, at some point in the proceedings, everyone will quiet down and beg Jim to tell his stories, and they'll sit around spellbound waiting for the next one and the next one and the next. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Brochu.
Well, thank you. I've had a very interesting life. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
And that's his book.
I tell you, Celeste and I have become friends over the last month. Steve, put up the first slide with you. I have some slides to show you. Oh, there's Meryl. Hi, Meryl, darling. She's connecting to audio. Excuse me. But Celeste and I have formed this program over the last couple of months, and I'm truly happy to be here in my bedroom, but talking to all of you. I've been really looking forward to this. As you heard from Steve, start from the beginning. Of course, I made a special slide especially for you. There it is, the Manor Club, February 23rd. So I have been lucky. That part I know. I have had a blessed life. Born in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. When I was 2 years old, my mother died. She had a very bad heart. And my father, who was absolutely movie star good looking and had a tremendous personality. There was an old joke, though, that we used to say, I never knew my father drank until I saw him sober. But he was very outgoing. And once he was a widower, all the women wanted to get to know my dad. He loved his Friday nights. He called it his night to howl. He worked on Wall Street. He was very, very successful, very dapper. He dressed like the Duke of Windsor. And the wonderful thing is he loved to travel. And it was through my father that I got to meet or have contact with these ladies. I'm going to talk about three women, extraordinary women that I got to know. Steve, let's see slide 2. And it's these, Steve, hit the button that says slideshow. See up there on the top? It's about the fourth one in. Animations slideshow. No, there, right there. slideshow, and then hit from beginning. Over there on the left.
Ah,
Okay, good. All right, there's the first one. So the three extraordinary women I'm going to talk about today is, next slide, Lucille Ball, Joan Crawford, and Ethel Merman. They all changed my life in certain ways. I'm going to talk about Merman first. Next slide. Up until the time I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a priest. And if anybody said to me, what are you going to be? I would say, I'm going to be a priest. I think every boy in Catholic school was either told or guided to that vocation. Well, my father worked for a company called Allen and Company on Wall Street, and he was a municipal bond trader. And the accountant for his company was a fellow named Ed Zimmerman. And Ed Zimmerman had a daughter named Ethel Merman. So Gypsy was playing. And I had heard about Gypsy. I had heard Ethel Merman's records. And I said, Daddy, can we please go to see Gypsy? Now, Gypsy had been condemned by the Catholic Church. So this was a big deal. And the priest said, if you go see Gypsy, you're going to burn in hell. And I said, I'll take my chances. So Dad got Ethel Merman's own house seats for the Saturday matinee of Gypsy. Well, we were sitting in E101. She came past the aisle down, Sing Out Louise, and she got on stage. And it was truly the first religious experience I ever had in my life. I was transformed by seeing that show. Then all of a sudden, Mr. Zimmerman was in the aisle next to us, and he said, come on, fellas, Ethel's waiting for us. So he took us backstage, and I can only remember the aroma of the theater. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was intoxicating. My dad had taken Merman out a couple of times, and so she knew him, and the doorman said, she's out on stage waiting for you. And it was like walking onto holy ground. The curtain was down, the stage hands were moving the sets around, and there was Ethel wearing that dress, that lavender dress, standing by a ghost light, and she looked over and she said, hiya, Pop. Hiya, Pete, my dad. She looked at me and she said, well, you must be Jimmy. And I turned into Ralph Cramden. I could not speak. So finally she said to me, what are you going to be when you grow up? And at that moment, the curtain of the Broadway theater rose. And there was the dark, empty theater with the ushers cleaning up programs and whatever had been left. And I just said, Miss Merman, I'm going to do this. So that was the beginning of my show business career. I went back to Brooklyn. I got all the kids together and I wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the Flag Court Follies of 1959. And I gave myself all the best parts, of course. And we raised $300 for the Cancer Society. I got to know Merman through the years. Her son went to Carnegie Tech, where I was studying, so she used to come down and visit. And then I remember one day I was at Roosevelt Hospital, and the elevator door opened, and in walked Merman wearing a Candy Stripers uniform. And I said, what are you doing here? She said, well, I work here on Wednesdays when I don't have a matinee. Her parents had been to Roosevelt Hospital, and they were so beautifully treated that Ethel decided she was going to volunteer one day a week. And somebody else got on the elevator and said, you look like Ethel Merman. She said, yeah, I've heard that before. So now comes my 30th birthday. Steve, let's see that next slide. That is my 30th birthday with Ethel Merman. That was taken at in Dinah Shore's dressing room at Studio City in Hollywood. And she said, let's go out for dinner. So there was about 6 of us, and she decided on a Chinese restaurant. And we all sat down, and the first words out of Ethel's mouth were, I don't share. So we all had to have our own things, and nobody touched anybody else's. The next slide, Steve. That was taken in California, on Catalina Island, and she was just there being mom, seeing her son. But around that time, I got a job as a director's assistant for a PBS show called Musical Comedy Tonight that Sylvia Fine, who was Danny Kaye's wife, was putting on PBS. And she was recreating 4 shows from 4 different eras. And one of the shows she was recreating was Anything Goes. So Merman was going to recreate her lead. She came into the rehearsal and she looked at me and she said, "Mother of God, little Jimmy Brochu, what are you doing here?" And I thought I hadn't been called little since 1958. But I said, "I'm the director's assistant and, we're going to be working together today." She said, "That's great. We'll have a drink afterwards." Well, we started the rehearsal and she came out to do Anything Goes. And Peter Matz was in the pit and the orchestra began the introduction to the song. And Ethel just stopped and looked around. She said, "What song is this?" And the director said, "It's Anything Goes, Ethel." She said, "I don't know that song. Why are you giving me songs I don't know?" And we all froze because she was serious. And Stan Harris, who was the director, said, "You know her, take her to the dressing room and tell her we have a technical problem and maybe she can lie down for a few minutes." So I did. I took her to the dressing room. Steve, that next slide. I had brought this picture with me that day. And so about 20 minutes later, I came in with that picture. And I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Yeah, what's going on?" I said, "Well, it's all fixed now. You ready to go?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "But would you do me a favor? Would you sign this picture first?" You can see her handwriting's a little shaky. But she looked at it and she said, "Mother of God, where'd you get that?" I said, "A couple of friends gave it to me." She said, "Honey, they ain't friends." Well, we came back out. The orchestra stuck up Anything Goes once again. And she was perfection. And you can see it on YouTube. Musical Comedy Tonight. Ethel Merman doing Anything Goes. And it was wonderful. But I could tell she was drained. And so at the end of the day, she said, "Honey, can we put off that drink for another time?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Ethel, do you remember the day that your father introduced me to you backstage at the Broadway Theater?" And she said, "Honey, I don't remember yesterday." Steve, let's have that last slide. This is my favorite picture of her. This is her last birthday. And she just looked so happy and drinking champagne and being with friends. What happened that day was the beginnings of a brain tumor that actually took her life 18 months later. And she had been silenced. About 10 years after her death, a friend of mine who was the executive of her estate called and said, invited Steve and myself over to his house for dinner. So we went over and he had all of Ethel's effects and souvenirs and mementos and pictures. And after a couple of minutes, he looked at his partner and they shook his head and he left the room. And when he came back, he put the urn containing Ethel's ashes in my arms. And her urn was made of pure brass, just like Ethel. So that was Ethel Merman. Let's see the next slide. My dad loved to travel, and I was the beneficiary of his wanderlust, thank God. So in 1960, this is just about a year after meeting Ethel, Dad decided he wanted to take a cruise, my very first cruise, and it was on that ship, which was the SS Brazil. And the Brazil was part of the Moore McCormick line. And you're getting ahead of yourself. Go back. Oh,
I didn't know it would do that.
I hate these technical people I've never worked with before. They're amateurs. Amateurs. Anyway, so we booked a trip on the SS Brazil. And all of a sudden, the word started to go out throughout the ship. Joan Crawford was on board. For 30 days, we would be with Joan Crawford. Now, I had absolutely no idea who or what a Joan Crawford was. I was 13 years old. So the next day, and I had met one celebrity in my life before that when I was 7, when my father and I were going to Florida. We were in the waiting room at Idlewild. It was Idlewild Airport back then. And there was this big applause and here came this woman in furs and a hat. There was just something special about celebrities. There was an air about it. And she looked at me and I had my pork pie hat and my coat and tie. And she said, "You're looking sharp, mister." And she got onto the plane and I said to my father, "Who was that?" He said, "Well, that was an actress named Irene Dunn." So Irene Dunn was my very first lady celebrity. All right, so now my father said, "Joan Crawford, she is my favorite actress. I have to get to meet Joan Crawford." And now I had always been trying to make a match for my father. I was making a shidduch, as we used to say in Irish. And so I was always looking out for a beautiful lady. So the next day there was a mixer for the teenagers on the ship. And so I went to the mixer and I met these two girls, Cindy and Kathy. And we hit it off and they said, "Well, we have games in our stateroom. Do you want to come back and play some games?" And I said, "Sure." So I went back and there was their mother, who was a beautiful redheaded lady. And she was sitting at the table without makeup and she was kind of doing her hair, dyeing it or whatever. And we just had a great time. We had a great talk. And I said, "Oh, you got to meet my father. My father's a very handsome widow." And she was a widow. My father was a widower and she was a widow. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make a match here. So I went back to the stateroom and I said, "Dad, I just met this absolutely beautiful, beautiful woman." And he said, "I'm not getting married again. I don't want to meet no beautiful women. Keep it to yourself." Okay. Well, that night we went to dinner. And we were sitting in the back of the dining room. And all of a sudden there was some applause at the dining room entrance. And my father looked up and said, "There she is. That's Joan Crawford." And I looked at him and she kept coming and she was walking over to the table. And he said, "Oh my God, she's coming over here. And all of a sudden Joan is standing in front of us and she said, "Oh, Jimmy dear, thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Wasn't it fun? And this must be your father, Pete." And at that point, he turned into Ralph Cramden. And she said, "Let's have a drink and a dance later, shall we?" And he said, and that night, they began a 3-year affair. Yes, they did. Well, one afternoon, it was not Thanksgiving, it was Easter, and I was home from high school on Easter vacation. And my best friend, Joey Maresca, and I had gone to the Frick Museum. So we came out, and Joan lived at 2 East 70th Street, which was right across the street from the Frick. She had the penthouse. So I said, "Well, let's go visit her." She wasn't expecting us. And I went up to the doorman, and I said, "I'd like to see Mrs. Steele, please." And he looked at the way we were dressed, which was hideous, and said, "I'm sorry, she is not at home." And I said, "Well, I know she is, and I know the girls are here, so just get on the phone and tell her Jimmy's here." Oh, I was terrible back then, just awful, snotty kid. And so he gets on the phone, and his face just went white. And she said, "You can go right up." But we were dressed so badly, he put us in the service elevator. So she was surprised that we came up the back way. And she said, "What are you doing? Why are you coming up this way?" And I said, "Well, the doorman didn't think we were dressed good enough to come up in the front elevator." And she got on the phone and she gave him holy hell for doing that. Now, she was on the board of directors of Pepsi at the time. So my friend Joey and I are sitting there and she said, "Joseph, wouldn't you like to have a drink?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll have a Coke." And of course, we all froze in the room, and she said, "Oh, Joseph, I'm so sorry. We don't serve Coke here. Wouldn't you like to have a Pepsi?" And he said, "No, I don't like Pepsi. It's too sweet." So she forgave him for that. We had a wonderful visit. And then I would go up and see Joan from time to time. I was very torn about a career, but just one sidelight. Steve, show that next slide. There was a couple of other, there's Joan in the middle. Those are her daughters, Cindy and Kathy. That's me in the white dinner jacket, which I think I still have. And that is my handsome father in the tuxedo on the right. He looked very much like Jimmy Stewart. which I think is one of the reasons my mother married him, because she was Jimmy Stewart's biggest fan. In fact, just as a sidelight, I met Jimmy Stewart once. And I said, Mr. Stewart, I'm named after you. And he said, oh, well, what's your name? I want to say Roger. What the hell do you think my name is? But anyway, that's Joni. Steve, go to the next slide. Now, I met this girl on the ship also, and we found out we lived 2 blocks from each other in Bay Ridge, and we became incredible friends. So that's the 2 of us at age 12, all right? And we stayed friends for all these years. And Steve, show the next slide. She did okay. Her name is Janet Yellen, and she is now the Secretary of the Treasury. So she's done very well for herself. And as I told Celeste, I gave her my class ring. And, you know, when we had dinner that night, just a few years ago now, she said, I'm not giving it back. And I said, well, okay, what am I going to do with it anyway? So that's my darling friend Janet, who I couldn't be more proud of, making history as the first woman Secretary of the Treasury. Steve, let's have that next slide. As I said, I was confused about my career. And I went up to Joan after this letter, I went up to see her. But they talk about Joan being mommy dearest. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Her daughter, Christina, is an out and out liar. She's a very jealous girl, and she was jealous of the career Joan had that she could never have. And Joan introduced me to a couple of people when I went to Los Angeles, one of them being her secretary, Betty Barker. And Betty said, I was there. They would know the things about cutting hatchets down and the slapping and tying in the bed. She said it never, ever happened. And the thing about wire hangers, Joan Crawford had a horrific childhood. She was subjected to physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse by a terrible, terrible stepfather. And she had to work her way through grammar school. And so when she was 9 years old, the job she had was putting the girls' blouses on wire hangers in the laundry. And Christina knew that. And she knew that wire hangers hurt her mother because it reminded her of the terrible childhood she had. So at this point, I wanted to be an actor and didn't really know what to do. And so I wrote to Joan. And I think this letter will show you the kind of a lady she was. She was a very caring, a very loving woman. And it's small, so I'm going to read it out loud. March 10th, 1966, Jimmy dear, how nice it was to receive your newsy letter. It's interesting that you've done so many things in such a short time, but I think now at 20, you had better settle down into something you're really going to do. You know I am your friend at all times, but I must tell you that even though you're 6'4", 200 pounds is too much weight for you, but I'm extremely proud that you lost 55. She'd scream if she saw me now. You mentioned that you're trying to do what your father wants you to do, which was take a job on Wall Street and follow in his footsteps. You always have been very close to him. I think he's right, and I think that Davy Burns is right. Now, Davy Burns was my mentor. He was an actor who was a friend of my dad's, who won 2 Tony Awards. He was the original Horace Vandergelder, Mayor Shin in The Music Man, Banjo in The Man Who Came to Dinner. And I wanted to follow in Davy Burns' footsteps and not my father's. So she says, there are very few who make it like Davy Burns. It takes discipline beyond belief and work, work, work. Of course, the other jobs that you've been seeking take discipline too, but not nearly as much as acting. The other jobs you've been seeking require perhaps more knowledge college-wise. Acting requires knowledge of people and understanding of people. I'm going off on a business trip for Pepsi-Cola tomorrow, but we'll be back in New York around March 20th. If you'd like to come up and have a talk with me, I'd be delighted to see you again. Or you may surely call me on the telephone. My number is still Murray Hill 8-4500. Bless you and have a nice talk with your father. And I'm always here if you need me. Love, Joan. Now, that letter to me belies the mommy dearest personality that's been ascribed to her. So a couple of weeks later, when she got back, I did go up and see her. This time through the front elevator. You had to take your shoes off because the carpets were all white. She didn't say anything, but there was a man sitting looking out the window. He was in a wheelchair. He looked very frail. He never moved, just kind of sat there and stared. And so we went into the kitchen and she was making bouillabaisse. And a commercial for a pizza thing came on and she said, oh, and she, by the way, she had no makeup. Her hair was kind of tied back and she was wearing a house coat. She was a housefrau. And she said, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go out and get a pizza? And I said, well, let's go. What's stopping us? And she said, Jimmy. And she looked at me like I was crazy. She said, it would take me 2 hours to get ready. I can't leave this apartment unless I'm Joan Crawford. And she believed in that old Hollywood mantra of a star being a glamorous star. But I also thought it was a two-way street, that she was imprisoned by her own image. And she said something to me that night that I'll never forget, but I didn't really understand what she was saying at the time. We talked about hard work and discipline. She was all about discipline, that you had to get up at a certain time and do things at a certain time and keep your life in order like that. And there's a point to all this. Oh, and she said, but I always knew I'd be a star as long as my back held out. Well, I thought she was talking about hard work. And then about 4 years later, I went, oh, that's what she was talking about. And she admitted it, that she used the casting couch to get where she wanted to go. And she wasn't afraid of it. And it was to get out of that horrific environment that she had been brought up with. And through all those things, through the discipline and hard work and her talent, she became a great star. So as I was leaving, no mention had been made of the man yet, who was still sitting there. So finally, I just said to her, Joan, who is that? And she said, oh, that's Francho. And it was Francho Tone. It was her second husband who had had a stroke. And she took him in and she took care of him until she died. Now, about 1976, Joan went to a reunion of the people who had done the film The Women. And she had her picture taken with Rosalind Russell. And the next day in the paper, her picture was there and she saw it. And she said, if I look like this, I'm never leaving the house again. And she became a recluse. Steve, let's see the next slide. Before that happened, of course, this is an afternoon that she was honored at the Players Club. And she asked me if I would be her escort. And I said, of course, I'd be, honored to take you there. And they showed the star's favorite film. And I didn't know this, but her favorite film was A Woman's Face with Conrad Veidt. And if you ever see it, it's a marvelous film. But then she always sent correspondence that were only typewritten, except to her children. She would write notes. Steve, let's see the next one. And that's the last note I ever got from her on August 16th, 1976. And she died on May 10th, 1977. And she died alone. But she left such a legacy, and I'm really upset and saddened that it had been tarnished by that evil, awful daughter of hers. So forget what you hear about Joan Crawford being Mommy Dearest, and just remember her as a great actress. You have to forgive me, I get a little emotional. Let's see the next slide. Lucille Ball. God, how I love this lady. When I was 13, my father took me to see Wildcat. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of laughter in our house. And so the only laughter that came was on Monday nights, looking at I Love Lucy, and I adored her. She became my idol. And so when I heard that she was in a Broadway musical, I begged my father, take me to see it. Now, he loved the theater, so there wasn't a whole lot of begging I had to do. And I was lucky that not only he loved travel, but he loved musicals. So he got great seats for Wildcat, and there she was in full living color in this wonderful show. And afterwards, I had my program, my playbill, and I really wanted her to sign it. So I waited around, and the curtain went up, and I was looking at the sets and the stagehands. I was standing in the back of the Alvin Theater, and all of a sudden she was on stage, and she was wearing this kind of aqua blue gown, and she went from one side of the stage to the other, and I ran down. I hit the orchestra pit with such force, I almost flipped right into it. And I held out my program. I said, Miss Ball, can I have your autograph? And she said, I'm sorry, no autographs today. Well, that broke my heart. Then when I was living in California, about 1977, I read that she was giving a 6-week class in comedy at the Sherwood Oaks Experimental College. So I signed up immediately thinking it's a seminar. There's just going to be like 10 of us around a table with Lucille Ball. Well, forget about it. There was 100 people in the class. And she wasn't a teacher per se, but she said, bring questions. And if you bring questions, I'll do my best to answer them about talent, about show business, about television, whatever you wanted to know. And so the 6 weeks flew by. At the end of the 6 weeks, I brought my playbill, my Wildcat playbill with me to have her sign it, finally, after 13, 17 years. I was 2 away from her, and just as I was about to hand it to her, her husband came in and said, come on, Luce, we got to go. And she said, bye, everybody, and I still stood there with the unsigned program in my hand. So now we cut to about 1987, the end of 1987. And I had written a play called The Lucky O'Learys, and it was about 2 sisters of a certain age. And I thought, oh, maybe Katharine Hepburn would be good. Now, another kind of name-droppy thing, I knew Katharine Hepburn. So I sent her the play, and she wrote back and she said, I'd be totally miscast in this. Why don't you ask Lucille? And I said, do you know how to get in touch with her? She said, no. And that was the end of that. So a producer friend of mine had just worked with her. And I said, I've got this play. Do you know how to get? He said, I'm not sure how to get it to her. Well, Steve and I went down to Hollywood Boulevard, and we got a Maps to the Stars homes. And there it was, 1000 North Roxbury Drive. So I wrote her a note. I said, I took your comedy class in 1977, which helped me become a writer, so you influenced me in that. Here's a play I wrote that Kate Hepburn thought you'd be right for, and I play backgammon. Now, I think it might have been that third thing that really caught her interest. Well, a couple of days later, and I put it in her mailbox at 1000 North Roxbury Drive. A couple of days later, the phone rang, and it was the great Lucille Ball. She had read the play. She said, you made me laugh for the first time in 2 years. And I couldn't figure out what had happened in 2 years that was so filled with unlaughter. Well, it turns out that she had done one final series. It was called Life with Lucy in 1986. And it was a disaster. She shouldn't have done it, but her husband, her greedy husband, Gary Morton, wanted to be the executive producer and made this arrangement with Aaron Spelling to shoot this series. They had a guarantee of 13 episodes with ABC, and after 6, she was canceled, the first time in her life she'd ever been canceled. And she told me eventually that the day it was all over, she walked out of the studio carrying her makeup case, and everyone turned their back. They didn't know what to say to her, and it hurt her so badly that she had not laughed in 2 years. Well, anyway, she said, I love the play. Can you come over and talk about it? I said, I would love to. So the next day, I showed up at my idol's doorstep, Lucille Ball. She opened the door herself. She was all in white. Her hair was done beautifully. And she said, are you a good backgammon player? And I said, well, we'll find out, won't we? And so that was the deal, that we would go to the back house and we would play backgammon. So I sat down opposite. We walked past the pool, and there was a small guest house in the back that had been set up pretty much as a game room. a backgammon table in the corner. And so she sat down, and I sat down opposite her, and crack, I broke her chair. It had wheels on the bottom, and the wheels just went out like this. I'm a rather heavy set person. Now, I didn't know whether to just sit there and freeze or to actually admit what I had done. So I said, Miss Ball. She said, oh, call me Lucy. I said, well, Lucy, I just broke your chair. She said, well, get another one. And I said, oh, okay, I'll get another one. So I took another chair, sat down, crack, I broke that one too. So that one she heard and looked at me like, oh, dear God, what have I gotten myself into? So I said, why don't I take that chair there? That one looks sturdy. She said, the other two look sturdy too. So I sat down in that chair. Now, she tried to tell me a joke, and she couldn't tell me a joke. And she was so frustrated, but the answer I gave her about telling her what a lousy joke teller she was, she thought that was the funniest thing she ever heard. She literally fell on the floor laughing. And I said, don't die. I don't want to be in the Inquirer tomorrow that I killed Lucille Ball by telling a joke, and which only made her laugh more. Well, we spent 5 hours together that day. We never talked about the play. We talked about growing up with one parent missing, her life in Jamestown, how her grandfather lost the house because he had bought her brother a shotgun, and the brother accidentally killed the girl next door as she was walking in the field by the house, and they lost everything, and they had to start all over again. How she went to New York at the age of 15. How many of you would let your daughters go to New York by themselves at the age of 15 from Jamestown, where she grew up? How she became a model for Hattie Carnegie, and how she developed rheumatoid arthritis that almost ended her career. She spent the 2 years from 17 to 18 in bed. And then she got a job with Sam Goldwyn. She was just standing in front of the Palace Theater one day, and a lady named Sylvia Hallow came along. Sylvia was an agent. And she had just lost a girl who was going out to be a Goldwyn girl because she was only 17 and her mother wouldn't give her permission. So she said to Lucy, well, you're a model, you're a Chesterfield girl. Do you want to be a Goldwyn girl? Lucy said, sure. So the next day she was on a train for Hollywood to be one of Sam Goldwyn's Goldwyn girls. Well, Sam Goldwyn took one look at her legs and said, you're not a Goldwyn girl. Look at those bird legs. And said, I've got to honor your contract for 3 months and then you're out of here. Well, they were doing a movie called Roman Scandals starring Eddie Cantor. So Eddie Cantor said, is there any girl here who's willing to take a pie in the face? And Lucy was the first to raise her hand. She got the pie in the face, and Eddie Cantor adored her and decided he was going to help her. She then went to Columbia, and she was working with the Three Stooges. And I said to her once, did you learn anything from the Three Stooges? And she said, yes, seltzer up the nose hurts a lot. Well, then she got a 7-year contract at RKO, where in 1940 she met Desi Arnaz, and it was love at first sight. They were married a little less than a year later. They were divorced for the first time in 1944, but there was a rule back then that if you cohabitated, then the divorce was off, and they cohabitated the night that they got the divorce, so that was off. We spent every day together since then. Can I have that next slide, Sleeve? At the end of the first day, she said, can you come back tomorrow? Because as I said, we spent 5 hours without ever talking about the play. And I said, yes, I can come back tomorrow, but tomorrow's my birthday. So if I come back, you have to give me a present. And she said, maybe I'll give you a chair. Well, the next day I came back and we had played for, oh, by the way, that first day I won by 1 point. So she knew she had a player, and I think that's one of the reasons I got invited back. She was lonely at that time. A lot of her friends had died, and I could make her laugh, and I could play backgammon. And it was through that we developed a very, very deep friendship. So that next day, we were playing for about an hour, and she went into the corner, and she came back with a little foil rectangular box and a hot cross bun with a candle singing, "Happy birthday to you." And I started to cry. And she said, "What are you crying for?" And I said, "Well, did Lucille Ball ever sing Happy Birthday to You?" And inside that box was this. It was this gold watch. And I don't know if you can see it, but it has her little caricature on it. And with that was that note that said, "Jim, I will always have time for you. Love, Lucy." Steve, let's see the next slide. So we would play backgammon every single day, and that's the two of us playing backgammon. She never got to do the play because she had had a mini stroke, and so she just wasn't up to working again. But as I said, we spent every day together. And then on April 17th it was. Now, Lucy, remember I said how Joan Crawford, it would take her 2 hours? I said to Lucy, "Do you want to go out for a pizza?" She'd grab her lipstick, put lipstick on, and out we would go. And it was always wonderful to see people looking at her. Is that really Lucille Ball? And the answer was yeah. And she was always wanting to know what they did. And she was always kind to the people who were her fans. Well, came April 17th of 1989. And we were playing backgammon, and she had a delivery. And it was a manila envelope. And she opened it up. And what it was a studio picture of her taken in 1940, an RKO publicity shot. Gorgeous. She was draped in white fur behind a beautiful drape. Her hair was done, looking absolutely glorious. And I said, "Oh my God, that's," she said, "Do you have this picture?" I said, "No, but I want one." And so she signed it, and she said, "Well, take it when you leave." And I did. I put it in the car, and I didn't think about it. And then I was going to see her the next day, as usual, and I got a call that she had been taken to the hospital. So she had had a stroke again, and something had happened to her heart. So we waited about 10 days, and finally Gary Morton called me, her husband, and said, "She's feeling great. She's sitting up in bed. She would love you to come over." Now, when she was starting out in show business, she used the name Diane Belmont as a model name. And it was Ethel Merman who convinced her to change her name back to Lucille Ball. So Gary said, "She'd like to see you tomorrow. Can you go over to Cedars-Sinai?" I said, "Absolutely, I'll be there." He said, "Be there at 1:30. She'll be waiting for you. Go to the north wing of Cedars-Sinai and ask to see Diane Belmont." Well, the next morning, so excited, and turned on the television, and it said, Lucille Ball dead at the age of 77. And she had died that morning of a ruptured aorta, a broken heart, I think. She couldn't work anymore. She was a very physical comedian, and she just knew her body wasn't responding the way it had. So I looked at the picture. Steve, that next slide. It said, "Jim, dear, you're very special. Love, Lucy." And I realized, I thought about that program, and I realized that just in time, I had gotten the great Lucille Ball's last autograph. And that is the story of my three ladies. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I would love to take them. Oh, and I've just written a book called Watching from the Wings, which is available at Amazon.com. Everything's available at Amazon, not just the book. You can get anything there. You want water wings, you can get them.
I don't know if the ladies have any questions yet, Jim, but I have to tell you, what a fabulous, fabulous program. I can't believe how much you have in your brain, and you remember the dates and the times and the whole thing. And I found it interesting when you said you've been given many blessings. You have, but you've given them back to the world, and that's really wonderful. I laughed when you said you wanted to be a priest, because I'm sure the churches would have been a lot more crowded had you been giving sermons than they are today.
I think I would have lasted about 10 minutes, Celeste.
Well, maybe I think, people would have been like wanting to stay instead of like, well, we only have 15 more minutes and we can leave. So
See, but
think
I
that's
really
great.
didn't want to. I didn't really want to be a priest. I wanted to be the first American-born pope.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, I used to practice coming out onto the balcony and waving to the crowd.
Well, now you come out onto the stage and do the same thing, just you don't have to wear that big pointy hat and stuff.
See, but I like the big pointy hat.
You have a question. Do you see it, Jim?
Oh,
I'll just
my
add my
recent
comment,
book.
just like you do on the stage with what you presented. It made me laugh and it made me cry. It made me think. It made me feel. You mesmerized. It was mesmerizing. It was so wonderful. And this book, which I have written with all your other wonderful stories, and you talk about it with the title Watching from the Wings, and very good that you watch them from the wings, but we could always watch you on the stage because you're such a tremendous actor. And thank you so much for sharing these magnificent stories with us.
Oh, thank you, Jane.
Just
Yes, to
beautiful.
answer your question, Diane, I discuss Crawford a great deal in the book, a great deal, and have put in other people, like I told you about her secretary, and another fella named Vincent Sherman, who was a director, and also Herbert Kenwith. Those were the three people that she made me meet when I moved to California. And they all talk about what a horrible person Christina was, and what really a kind and loving and shy person that Joan was. So yeah, I discuss it a lot in the book.
Jessica, can you put the screen so that we can see Jim now in person? I can't. I don't know if everybody else can, but hello, there he is.
Hello, everybody.
You did have a question. Diana, would you put that back up again in case it went away? She's going to do that. Anyway, yes. Hi, Meryl.
Hi, sweetheart.
Hi, Meryl, darling.
Is this man the most delicious man or not?
He's everything you said and more and more.
He's going
Unbelievable.
no.
Am I compelling or what?
You are. I
Melanie,
myself, I'm not Jewish and I'm
Melanie
compelling.
means I'm so proud. I'm so proud. Oh, Jim, that was gorgeous.
Thank you.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. I love talking about these ladies. They all changed my life, and
Wow.
they all appeared in my life at a certain time. That the old saying is that the teacher never appears until the student is ready, and these women appeared in my life at a very early age, and I was blessed to be so close to them.
Jim, it sounds like they were blessed to have you in their lives
Yes.
too,
Oh,
and
thank
what you
you.
gave to them. Like what
Oh,
you,
and let me just plug that on this Sunday night on Turner Classic Movies, I'm the guest host.
Oh,
And at 8 o'clock, I'll be introducing a Lucille Ball film with Zero Mostel called Do Barry Was a Lady.
Oh, yeah.
And
okay, so
stay
everybody
tuned-
will be tuning
and
into that
Stay tuned for
one.
the 10 o'clock slot, where I may be introducing a second film, but they're deciding now because it's a Woody Allen film, and now Woody's in trouble, and so who knows? But at least at 8, you'll see me at 8 o'clock on Turner Classic Movies, and I'm
Okay.
absolutely as delightful there as I've been today.
And then Jim, didn't you just write another book? You wrote another book during this.
I did. I needed to do something during this lockdown, and I always wanted to write a murder mystery. So I just finished my first murder mystery. It's called Murder on the Orpheum Circuit, and Jack Benny is the detective.
Oh, God.
It takes place in 1926, and he actually solves the murder.
And I
I
read
see.
it and it's wonderful.
I
And it's
see so
amazing, Jim, with all your talents, because in addition to writing and so many things from playwriting to writing mysteries to writing regular books, then you also shared with me and maybe with others some of your incredible drawings. I wish you
Oh,
could show
yeah.
some of those. I mean, it's an amazing thing to have talents that go into so many areas and can sing as well and
Well,
act.
thank you. No, there's nothing around that I can show. They're all put away.
I see Diana has a question.
Oh,
Question.
I did. Yes. Let me see if I can. I wanted to know, I know you said that you wrote in extensively in your recent book about Miss Crawford, but I was thinking if you would just write one book about her and her relationship. So there would be a comparable book that would show the rest of the world what you thought of this lady and kind of reverse the picture that that particular book gave of her, of Miss Crawford.
Well, I'll tell you, Diane, what I've said about Joan in the book is really all I have to say. It's all very personal, but there are other books there that are much more scholarly books
Oh, I
that
see.
also take Christina to task.
Right.
Yeah, so I've written what I wrote about Joan wouldn't fill a whole volume. If I was going to do a book about Joan, I'd have to go into her history and do a lot of
Right.
research about her. But all my personal experiences and my letters, I have a stack of letters from Joan, which are just wonderful. That I've published a lot of them in Watching from the Wings.
All right. Thank you. I look forward to getting the book.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No?
Can I say something? I have so much to say. So Jim and Steve, you have changed my life, and Jane's wonderful, and I think you're going to have her someday. She's a published author. I think that you've changed both of our lives, and Magda and our buddies and Pat Addis. But I mean, this is so gorgeous, and someday you're going to hear Steve play the piano. I mean, and sing his work. I mean, so these are such talented, sweet, brilliant men.
He's
I
all
wanna
right
do
if you
that
like
live.
talent.
I want to do that. I want to do that live in your theater.
We would
Yeah.
love to have you. We have a lovely Steinway. It's beautiful. It's recently tuned, and I'll work on that. That would be, to see you both in person would be lovely. But I mean, I think it's fabulous when people have such beautiful memories to cherish and, you know, keep them in their hearts and stuff. And it was nice watching Jim grow up from this little boy
Yeah.
going on and being a grown young man and then a handsome older man. I mean, what a great life you had. You really did. And I think your dad's to be given a lot of credit because he did a really good job.
He really was an amazing guy. He was very outgoing. I'll tell you one of my favorite memories about my father is there used to be a restaurant called Jilly's, which was right next door to the Alvin Theater where a lot of people hung out. And so that's where my father would wait for me when I went to see a show. Then I would take Davy Burns, who was my mentor, and we would meet my father at Jilly's. And as I said, my father was pretty good with the booze. So I walk into Jilly's one night and they had a trio playing and I hear my father singing and I just wanted to die. I thought, oh dear God, he's at the microphone, he's singing, but I hear a woman's voice singing with him and he's doing a duet and the piano bar was just like around this little corner. So I turn the corner and here's my father bombed doing a duet with Judy Garland, who is also bombed, and they're doing Hey Jealous Lover. Hey Jealous Lover, you're acting so strange. Whoom, whoom. And so I guess, well, if he's singing a duet with Judy Garland, who am I to complain?
Absolutely. But
Yeah,
what,
he was a darling man.
Where did you
That's
get all these talents from? Was it from your father or your mother or your grandparents? Because to be so good in all these areas, there must be DNA in your family.
I have no idea. I take after my grandfather, Dick Condon, more than anybody else. My grandfather was a fascinating man. he won the James Gordon Bennett Medal, for which was the highest medal that you could get in the New York City Fire Department, and he won it in 1911 for saving like 25 people from the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, that very, very famous fire. And then he worked on the docks, and then he worked on Wall Street as a receptionist. You know, he was a big guy. I take after him, and he always had a cigar. And they said to him one day, the retirement age was 65. And they said to him one day, Dick, how old are you? Look great. And he said, now don't tell anybody, but I'm 81. And they fired him the next day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he had no place to go. And yeah, it was kind of sad.
Sad, very.
Yeah, he was a very engaging guy. Very funny.
Well, you do take after him then. Now, everything. And ladies, any more questions? Thoughts? Compliments? Money?
I've got a good carbonara recipe.
I bet.
You have the best egg salad.
Is that
Now,
right?
That I do, Merrill,
I
and you
know.
know that. You know that.
Best egg salad in the world, and a
In the world.
bowl, a huge bowl. I mean, the bowl is so big, full of egg salad.
And is it
No.
empty when everybody leaves? It's
Empty, empty.
Wow, yet another talent that we don't know about.
I have 2 words, and it's the only thing I put into it. Celery salt.
Oh, no. Well, I have to say, I think we've learned from your program today that perseverance certainly pays off, and you did persevere.
Like Elizabeth Warren. And yet she persevered.
There's Diana again. She has a question for you.
She wanted to know if you have any idea when Broadway will open up.
They're talking about Hamilton reopening in July. And I think everything is still very, very fluid, Diana, until people are vaccinated, until this thing called herd immunity comes back. It's certainly not going to be the way we know it.
No.
They're not going to have packed houses. You know, there's going to be still social distancing. I don't know how it works, but Celeste, please get that. And,
I'm just turning it off, actually. Nobody
I
calls
don't
me. I
know.
told you.
One of the things I miss more than anything else is Sardi's. Merrill and Jane and a few other people and myself, we go to Sardi's for our Soup Society meetings on the 2nd floor, and I miss that very, very much. So, of course, Sardi's can't reopen until Broadway reopens, and I hope it's this summer, but only God knows.
Well, you were in a show, and I was going on March 16th.
March 12th was the
March
opening.
12th.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we had just done the dress rehearsal. In fact, Steve saw it. It was an off-Broadway show called The Class Act.
Right.
You were coming. Jane was coming that Friday night. And at 4 o'clock, they said, don't show up. And that's the night it all shut
closed.
down, March
Broadway
12th.
went dark. Broadway went dark on that date, and you called, you said, show's called off.
Yeah,
Oh.
everything was called off.
Yeah.
Well,
Almost a year.
Incredible.
maybe they'll do it again.
Steve, you're muted.
I see Carla thanks you for a wonderful program.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it really was spectacular. It really was. I knew it would be, though. And Merrill, thank you for putting Jim and myself and Steve in touch with one another, because I mean, you know all these wonderful people and I don't. So thank you so much.
Well,
But
I
it was
hope you feel you know them a little bit better after today, because
Oh, I think everybody loves you both.
it's my great pleasure to share these stories, because I loved them all so much. And as I say, I feel blessed that I was able to be close to these ladies.
But they're interesting. They're not boring. They're lively. And, you throw a little, imitation of the way they speak and stuff in it. It really was so entertaining and so wonderful and such a great life. I mean, and I hope everyone that's listening and the people who tune in after Jessica puts up the recording will watch the show on Sunday and also get that book, because I have a copy of it and I think it's great. And I think you'll all love it. The photos in it are fabulous, and
What
there you
book is
go.
that? What book are you
That's-
talking about?
That's it.
I'm shameless.
God bless you for being that way. Anyone else have questions, or we will close the program and just,
And Celeste,
No.
thank you.
Yes.
You
Oh,
do a brilliant
Yes, Celeste,
job.
one of the great
really do
joys
such
of
a
this
great
has been
job.
getting to know you.
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, honest to God. And Steve, we will fulfill your wish and you will come to the Manor Club together and pack the house when we can have all 340
Oh, yeah.
filled to the hilt. So I thank you very much for your time today, for your energy, and just for being the gift to all of the world that you are, both of you. Thank you so
Did you
much.
hear that, Steve? I'm a gift. Don't you damn forget it.
Where do we
It's great
return?
to see you all. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Bless you
Thank
both.
you.
And we'll see you all,
Love
again.
you all.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
Meryl.
Time
Love
for
you.
a
Thank
nap.
you, Meryl. Thank you. Okay. Bye now.
Bye.
All right. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Take care.